You are listening to the CMD Project. I'm your host, Daniel Lackey, and this is episode 16. Now, last week we dove into negotiations quite a bit. I touched on some core strategies that I've learned through reading 4 books that I recommended and some of the things that I implement into my everyday scenarios when I'm dealing with adjusters or when I'm negotiating. Now, that episode, although we discussed negotiations, I realized it leaned a little heavy onto adjusting, public adjusting, and insurance claims. So today I want to touch on 5 specific key elements and strategies that you can apply anywhere. And that's not to say some of the material from last week you can't apply in different scenarios, but negotiations are everywhere. This is whether you are negotiating for a raise at work or negotiating with one of your idiot friends for a trade in your fantasy football league. I mean, if you just open your eyes and you look around, you will see that every day, everywhere you go, you're going to have some sort of opportunity to negotiate. Now, that leads me into number 1, reading the room. Just being aware of your surroundings, being able to read social cues. You know, we all have that one person in our life, that idiot friend who they're just clueless. They're in a room and they just say something inappropriate or just not fitting for the moment, or the joke just goes over their head. You don't want to be that person. You want to be the one who's picking up on the social cues. You know, the person you're communicating with, their tone of voice, if it shifts to, irritated, you're able to adjust, able to pick up on that and adjust and steer it back to where they are a little more compromising and a little more receptive to what you're saying. And we do this every day. Everybody does this all day, every day. Just not a lot of people practice it. Not a lot of people put time in to actually go in with a strategy and with specific things that they want to gain. It's kind of just a freestyle of this, if you will. And what I mean by this is we're doing it all the time without even realizing it. You know, you are picking up on social cues all the time, but just being aware in general. And this goes into body language as well. You know, body language is a big part of how we communicate with each other. It's body language, it's tone of voice, and it is the actual words that are coming out of your mouth. And for example, tone of voice is a big thing as well. You know, you can have a sarcastic tone of voice, you can have an angry tone of voice, a scared tone of voice. Same thing with body language. You can tell a confident person from a not so sure of themselves individual oftentimes just based off their body language and the tone of their voice, regardless of the words that are coming out of their mouth. And when you're in a negotiation, this is step 1 is reading the room, having situational awareness, picking up on social cues, because it gives you a lot of information on the type of person that you're negotiating with. Now, I've negotiated with hard-nosed, pit bull style type, I guess, negotiators. I've negotiated with not so confident, not so sure of themselves negotiators as well. How they get into that position of negotiating, I'm not really sure. But when you're negotiating, especially when you're doing it for a living, you're going to run into all different types of opposing people on the other side. Not everybody's going to be the same. Not every negotiation is going to be the same. So, for example, if I'm negotiating and I'm trying to get approval on something, or if I'm talking a number just in general, let's say I'm negotiating and I want $10,000, and that person is talking and they're over-explaining. That typically means that they're unsure. And that's kind of a telltale sign that they're not the one to make that decision. I've dealt with this in claims before. We get this often. We're going to have to review that internally if I make an offer, for a settlement. Hey, you guys open coverage for this. We're sitting here, but we're willing to take this to get this closed out today. And when we receive that response of, okay, we're going to have to review this internally, that tells me right then that the person that I'm negotiating with is not the decision maker. I need to get to the decision maker, or I need to negotiate with this person to see what that decision maker needs. How do we close this gap? What do you want to see from my side to make it easy for you to give me my position? But also, negotiations aren't always face-to-face, on the phone, fast-paced, let's get this settled today. Very rarely is a negotiation, especially in our industry, settled just like that. Oftentimes it's a long, drawn out process, and oftentimes when I'm negotiating, it's more than one person I'm negotiating with. I may negotiate with John Doe the first month of this deal, and then the next month that file or whatever negotiation we have going on gets moved to a completely new person. And now we have to reread the room. We have to reanalyze everything. We have to get to know that person, build a relationship with that person on the opposing side, and start the negotiations over. In a sense, not in its entirety, but just the relationship part of things. The numbers and everything, when you're documenting and you're keeping track, oftentimes those are going to start where they were with that previous person. But when you are dealing with these people, when you're dealing with an opposing negotiator, someone on the other side, and again, no matter what scenario it is, my tip number 2 is to control the tempo. And what I mean by that is people's actions often give away a lot of information. If I'm negotiating with somebody and they're trying to speed it up and they want to get this done, that's telling me that they're desperate to get this settled. That's telling me they're overworked. They have too much on their plate. That's telling me that potentially they're walking a thin line on their side of things with their superiors. So if they're pushy, you slow down. If they're slow, you push, because urgency in them reveals desires. And just because they're trying to sprint doesn't mean that I'm gonna sprint too to keep up with them. I'm gonna slow things down. I'm gonna make sure we look at everything objectively, and I'm gonna make sure we leave no stone unturned. When I sense desperation, I might read an email and not respond for a few hours or even a few days. And oftentimes I'll get a follow-up email with an even higher offer. But then we ask ourselves, what if it's the opposite? What if they're the ones stalling and we're the ones wanting to get it done? Well, in that case, I'm going to give an ultimatum. I'm going to throw my offer out and I'm going to give them a deadline. Hey, we're willing to settle this, or I'm willing to take a $3 raise. Whatever case it may be, you have until Friday to give me an answer. Otherwise, I'm going to rescind my offer. And now, regardless, even if that person is slow, that creates urgency on their side. And it works both ways. I've tried the stalling tactic and I've had this deployed on me, and it's been effective against me. And I've used it myself, and it's been effective when I've implemented it. And number 3 here is calibrated questions. I know we touched on this one last week, but getting away from the yes and no answers. When you're asking calibrated questions, you're building rapport. You are diving into a deep conversation. Do you ever have a conversation with somebody and it just flows so naturally? It's you guys can talk for hours and you don't run out of things to talk about. Well, when you're asking people calibrated questions, or they're asking you questions that are calibrated, that make you think, just naturally those conversations tend to flow a lot better than yes or no questions. A yes or no question, I will give you yes, and then I'm out of things to say. But if you had reframed that question to me to where I had to think and I had to respond with something other than yes or no, well, that conversation is going to go a lot farther. It's going to be a lot more fruitful. And don't take this the wrong way, because this doesn't mean just ask any nilly-willy calibrated questions you can out there. You've got to be very selective with what you ask. I'm not going to ask 20 or 30 in-depth questions that are irrelevant to the situation at hand. I'm going to ask 3, I'm going to ask 5, and they're going to be geared towards the goal that I'm trying to reach. And you can even add a label onto a calibrated question. You could say something such as, it sounds like timing's tight on your end. What would I have to change in my position for you to be able to get approval on this? So you labeled there with, it sounds like timing's tight. And obviously you can pick up on this, as we touched on, with tonality, body language. You can pick up on these little cues from people, just having that social awareness. You can oftentimes tell when somebody's in a rush. If they're in a rush, call it out. You don't have to be rude about it, but hey, it sounds like you have a lot on your plate. This way you've called it out and you didn't do it in a dickish manner. The person feels heard. They've been asked a question that they have to put some thought into. And when you ask a question like that, they're going to give you everything you're asking for. What do I need to change in my position for you to be able to get approval? And whatever they tell you, they've put the ball back in your court. And it's up to you whether you make those changes or not, but you have your answer on what their position is and what's stopping them from approving where your position is. Do you see what I'm saying? And number 4 is reputation is everything. When you have a job where negotiations are a big part of it, you're going to realize, whether it's in the car industry or in the appraisal industry, that for insurance appraisals or the adjusting industry, or whatever it may be, brokering deals for a Fortune 500 company. It's a very small knit community, I'm sure, in all of those. I know in my industry, it's very small, it's very tight knit. And once you've been in it a while, people begin to get a reputation. And there's this old saying in negotiations: if you win ugly once, they're going to sandbag you the next time. If you win clean, it's going to open doors faster. What that really boils down to is you don't have to be a bulldog 24/7. You don't have to be a complete asshole to win a negotiation. Sure, that strategy may win. Sure, sometimes it's needed. Absolutely. But I always recommend and I always advise, go in first trying to find common ground. And then from there, find the problem. And then from there, close the gap. That's all a negotiation is. If you're nice and if you're respectful to the opposing side, and I've said this before, it's disarming. Even if they're an asshole and you're nice and you're respectful, oftentimes it's going to be reciprocated to at least a minimal extent. It's very hard for someone to be an asshole to someone who's super nice to them. And what that does is that leads to building rapport with that person. And when you have rapport with somebody and you like somebody, if you genuinely like somebody, even if they're on the opposing side, I have plenty of people on the opposing side. Although our jobs are different, our goals are different, there's plenty of people on the carrier side that I look at and I say, I respect that person and I like that person. That's genuinely they're a good person. They're just doing a job. And when you get to that level with people, they're more inclined to give you what you want. But it works both ways. That's not me saying, give me, give me, give me. When I do like those people, I'm also inclined to give a little bit on my position. You see what I'm saying? But ultimately, the reputation that you want when you're in negotiations, you have to be careful because you don't want to be too soft. You want to be firm but fair. And if you can maintain that firm but fair reputation, it's going to take you very, very far when it comes to negotiations. Because if you're too soft, you're going to get chewed up and you're going to get spit out and you're not going to last very long. And you can be firm and you can be fair and you can be kind all at the same time. But don't be too soft and don't be too hard. You've got to find that middle ground, somewhere in the middle there. And number 5, know when to walk away. You're not going to settle every negotiation. Nobody out here is batting 1,000. I don't win them all. Nobody wins them all. There are going to be individuals that you just cannot win with. There are going to be positions opposing your position that are just so outlandish and so ridiculous that there's no compromising. So as I previously mentioned, be prepared. And part of being prepared is having your bottom dollar. If that bottom dollar is hit, that doesn't mean, I can go a few dollars under that and to get this settled. No, your bottom line is your bottom line. You do not go below that. Otherwise, you're just chasing down just to get deals closed. I would rather close 5 huge deals than 50 tiny deals just to say I closed them. So do not be afraid to walk away from a negotiation. Do not be afraid to walk away from the table. There's always going to be another negotiation. There's always going to be another deal. And even if you walk away from that table today, those negotiations for that same deal may reappear. And then number 6, just a bonus tip here. And I see so many people doing this one when they're making counteroffers. I watch, what is that show? The Pawn Shop, the Pawn Stars. That's it, with the the guy Rick. And they'll walk in and they try their negotiations at the table. And Rick will say, I'll give you $20,000 for it. The guy comes back, give me $18,000. Rick says, I'll give you 17. The guy says, give me 12, and so on and so forth. You guys get the point. But you notice what they're doing there is they're giving just round numbers. They're just throwing bullshit out. When you're countering, never, ever, ever counter with just a random even number ending in zeros. When you're countering, and I will do this in mediation, I will say, hey, do you mind if we break out here for a moment? And this is where I'll take my time. I'll let the silence build. I go into my private room and I have my counter ready before I even ask to break out. But I want them to think that I'm working on it, you see? And I always counter with an odd number, down to the penny. If they offer 20 and I'm countering, it's going to be something along the lines of $19,348.15. When you take the time to counter and you make them wait, it's from their perspective, you've put time and you've put thought into that counter. Even if that was just a random number I pulled out of my ass like I just did, it gives the appearance of, okay, this person's really put thought into that counter. They're over there crunching numbers, and it makes them a little cautious on coming down too much sometimes. So that's tip number 6, guys. I know I said 5, but I wanted to give that 6th one just as a little extra. Go ahead and try that one. Try it when you're dealing with a street vendor, something. Just to recap, guys, we went over reading the room, controlling the tempo, calibrated questions, knowing when to walk away, protecting your reputation and building a great reputation, and then put some thought into your counters. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up here, guys. If you like the content, go ahead, give a like, give a follow, and we'll see you on the next one.